Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cynthia the Audio Belle, and I am here today with Jeremy. Jeremy is my coworker, and he is also an audiophile, so I asked if he would allow me to interview him, and he said yes, and here we are. So, how are you today, Jeremy?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Doing well. Just wanting to talk to you a little bit about how you got into audiophile, the hobby in general, and what all you have in your system. And then we're going to go a little bit in depth about some of the things he's done. He has 4 LRS speakers, just a spoiler alert. And he's done some cool things with them. He's also gotten into equalization. He's going to talk a little bit about that. So let's start off with how you got into the audiophile hobby.
Wow. So my father, as a child, I used to like ride in his car, and he had this really loud sound system, and it was so loud that it was painful. And if anybody ever knew anything about SPL versus volume, that's a good example. My father. So I knew and had grown to know what I didn't like, but my ears were so accustomed to being used to hearing loud things, but not necessarily clarity. And then further in my years growing up, I had several different like sound systems and stuff like that. Nothing like super great, but it all started really kicking into like listening to definition and really just getting the clarity of things is when I started working at a theater in Pennsylvania. It was a single screen theater, the first Dolby Digital theater in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And that it had 13 surround sound speakers to it, 3 giant speakers up front for center, left, and right that stood taller than I am, and then 2 16-inch subs that sat underneath the stage. This theater sat like 400 or 500 some people, so it was pretty large, and the sound was filled, and it sounded great, balanced, and that's really where I guess I could say that I started to really fall in love with audio because of its clarity and just how amazing that sounded. So since then, I had moved away and started working another job somewhere else, and obviously still not connected with that beautiful sound anymore. So it's been kind of a tidbit here and there, kind of getting a taste for different things here and there, kind of getting a little bit of that similar that taste that I once had for that same sound, but never really like super achieving it until I would say more so as of recent. So in the last, I would say 2 years or so, I decided to start picking up on trying to figure out, what I can do to try to get that sound back again. And I started just buying some really cheap equipment off of, Craigslist, the Facebook market, that kind of thing. And I picked up a pair of Mordaunt shorts, just some bookshelf speakers with a 100-watt sub off of Amazon, and I picked up like a $60 receiver that maybe was like 10 years old. Nothing super fancy. It was a Yamaha or something like that. And I got all that connected and going, and things sounded really, really good. But from there, it evolved. It's kind of like a drug, so to speak, in a way, where it's like you get a little taste of something and you need more and you want more, and you keep driving back, and I keep remembering back to the theater of what exactly it sounded like, and just desiring to have more and more.
So you're trying to get your sound to be more along the lines of what you had at the theater?
Yes. So that was kind of the initial intent. What I did not realize is exactly what I was getting into when I had went down that route. So expanding upon that, I broke into, getting a couple monoblocks, some, preamp, LRS speakers, and a SU audio subwoofer. And now it's just, again, further from there. So I ended up getting like 4 LRSs throughout the whole deal, and I've had some fun playing with those and kind of getting those kind of connected in a really interesting way, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later.
Right.
But as far as the experience and where it's come from, and then just continuing to step up the game to achieve what I once had. I've now expanded to desiring just a tidbit different as well. So I've come to desire, a 5.1 audio system in its place, and a 2-channel audio system in its place. Well, mine's more like a 2.1, but you get what I'm saying.
So you're doing more of a blended approach to both home theater and just listening to music.
Yes. So I have, I would say it's an undying, need for subwoofer. I like to feel the music, the beats, the movies, as well as like hearing it. Stuff that makes your pant leg rattle just a little bit when there's an explosion in a movie, kind of brings back that same like the theatrical feel. Music's similar in a way where if there's a big drum in the back of an orchestra that hits, I want to be able to feel that the same way that I would feel it like sitting in the seat, that I want it hits your chest, something that's impactful and powerful, but I don't want something that makes a snare drum sound like, one of those big drums in the back. So you have to have a balance. And that's also kind of where we're going as far as like equalization, like some of the talks that we're just discussing. But
right. And in later videos, Jeremy's going to kind of go into how he's equalizing his system. And we're probably also going to do one on his specific subwoofer and some of the things that you can tweak on it, like Q controls and some of the more nerdy stuff that he's been able to kind of fine tune his bass response in his system. So Jeremy, you were talking about the evolution of your audio system and how you started out with Mordaunt short bookshelf speakers, a receiver, and some lower end components just to get you started. What does your audio system consist of now?
Well, I have 2 LRS speakers currently hooked up anyways. Then they attach to 2 amps, Emotiva HC1s, 600 watts. From there, I have a preamp. It's a Shit Freya Plus. It's got four tubes to it. They glow really pretty.
Nice.
From backwards from there, I have a DAC that's connected to my PC. It's a Topping D30 connected via USB. And then, so as far as the phono side of things, I have a Project 2 box DS attached to a Rega RP6 and an EA cartridge. It's a low output moving coil. So that kind of, in a nutshell, wraps up. I did have some other components in there connected. I don't have them right now connected. I've been able to mostly balance out the subwoofer and its boominess, but otherwise I'd have some sort of crossover and equalizer attached to that system as well.
Okay. So you have a Rega turntable. Is that your first turntable?
No, I had an Audio Technica a turntable for my first one, and that I pretty much got when I got my Mordaunt shorts and receiver as well. So no. Okay,
so what's the difference in sound from your system now to your previous system and the evolution of that?
I mean, it's day and night. That turntable I had a lot of issues with, especially when trying to introduce like the subwoofer and stuff into the environment, where the subwoofer would have some vibration and bounce off, and then that would actually vibrate my table, and that would vibrate my cartridge, which would vibrate my subwoofer. So it was kind of like a loop. So as soon as there was one thump, it would just literally sit there and loop, and I couldn't hear anything. And I was like, well, this is really great for the record. So I ended up like stopping that once I got the subwoofer introduced in there, even more so. I was like, I'm gonna have to like not play so much until I really pick up a nice system, because even though I try to like isolate the audio and stuff, it was picking up everything that the subwoofer was pushing out.
Well, what was it about that turntable that was picking up stuff from your subwoofer that this one is not?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is it was made of plastic, so reverb, just
like
vibrations.
The dust cover?
Yeah, well, not even just the dust cover, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was just some kind of plastic. So basically, I think it was just kind of acting like something that was receiving a whole lot of like waves and standing waves and stuff like that, kind of like a guitar almost. So it just kind of picked it up and shoved it throughout the chassis to the coil. That's the only thing I could think of.
But everything sounds great now.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's pretty well balanced right now. I could probably right now, currently in its current state, I need to actually hook back up the equalizer and remeasure those, and then get the crossovers back into it. When you add like the 0.1 to the whole system, you almost want and need a crossover to cut off the low end values from the LRS guys that their hertz cut off at like 45. So I end up cutting them off about 50 and shove the rest of it down to the sub. And that way you don't have waves that are conflicting with each other. The sound that's coming out of the sub is what it's supposed to be, and vice versa. And as far as the equalization stuff, well, like I said, that's going to be more into like later on topic.
So what do the LRSs sound like without the subwoofer?
So they're beautiful. They're great in the high end. They struggle on the low end. Specifically for me, like I said, when I hear that punch of a drum, I really want to hear it and feel it. This, I feel like they lack depth to hear those super low tones and as loud as I like to hear them. So they can produce the mid tones, which I think they struggle a little bit with. They can produce the mid tones pretty well. I would say maybe about 80 to 90%. And the high tones, obviously, there's nothing to match those. They scream. But the low end, there was a lot to be desired. And as far as the early on process with things, I ended up blowing a lot of fuses off the bat when trying to just, without the sub, just producing straight sound to them. I couldn't turn them up really high. The Emotivas, they were just pushing way more wattage than they could handle. And I still, to this day, I can only probably turn it up about halfway or so, roughly. So maybe only about 300 watts to those guys before they're just like, okay, I've had too much.
Well, I'm going to ask you the question that usually a shrink would ask, but how does that make you feel? You can't turn it up all the way.
I mean...
or as much as you'd like to.
Well, how would you feel if you could, not turn it up as loud as you would like it to sound?
Well, I could say I've been there. I've been there with my 1.7 eyes and my 3.7 eyes. The 3.7 eyes have been the best about it. Just they've been able to handle it a lot better, and I've been able to turn those up considerably. And there's only been maybe a very small handful of times that I've blown fuses on those, which is why I went to the 3.7 eyes, because the 1.7 eyes were doing that. Because I like to listen to some stuff loud. So right. I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, and there is a difference, though, of, hearing loud music that fills the room and then loud music that hurts. Like I was saying with my dad and growing up, he played loud music and it hurt. But you can have music that's loud, that fills the room, that doesn't hurt. These I haven't got to that point where it feels like they're like distorting out, and then where it's just like, no, I can't push them anymore. No, they just blow fuses. So
yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with my own system, with the lack of acoustical treatment in my room and so much kind of screeching on the high end, not literally, but as far as it hurting your ears and needing to get into equalization. And so that's actually when I contacted Jeremy, because Jeremy said he was getting into equalization and he had an equalizer. And so he recommended I get one, and he kind of showed me a little bit about using some software to get those high tones pulled down just a little bit, not really removing so much of the music as it is just more along the lines of tuning it to your room. So tell me a little bit about what you've done with that in your own system.
So equalization, for the most part, where I've had its applicable use and where I would say it's almost required is on the low end. Any kind of, like you're introducing a subwoofer to a system, you have to have some sort of equalization because of the way the room is, the acoustics of, say, the subwoofer. A lot of, surprisingly or not, a lot of bass is really annoying and can be if it's not being produced well and being controlled. That's when things get sloppy. So having to pull that back a little bit and then finding out exactly, say, what hertz is causing the most. So the range of a subwoofer, I believe Dolby Digital, I think they're 90 hertz and below is what they push to their subwoofers. So you have to see on a graph, and I'm kind of, like you said, really nerdy on this, but as far as like on a graph, you have this range that you're working with, and the range as far as like this would be like 90, this would be 0. Well, you have like a scope of like, well, okay, the 90 sounds really good, but I lose a dip down in the 60 range. So when you turn a subwoofer up, all you're going to be doing is turning up those two ranges of where everything's good, and then you're still lacking on that middle range where, you know, a lot of the action's happening. So the whole goal of equalization is obviously to flatten and level everything out. So it'll help with the room. Like if I'm getting a dip here down at the 60 range, to give that signal a little bit of a boost, or even better, to bring the other signals down to that level. So anytime that you add, decibels, or I guess decibels gain basically to those missing frequencies, you have a potential to distort and cause issues. So basically you want to turn up the volume, say on the sub, and then bring the other levels down to it. So it flattens things across the band. Now, as far as your system goes and the depiction of everything on the high end of things where you get the screech. So basically it's the same thing applied there, where you just try to take a level and then find out how much and where it needs to be brought down. Now, as far as getting into like theatrical acoustics, as far as equalization goes, they have this thing called a room curve, where really in a room you'd want a little bit of a high end boost, or like a 2 decibel boost on the low end, and then you remove like 1 to 2 decibels on the high end, where it helps to balance around the room so things don't get super screechy or super bassy, but you still get that punch of a theater. And that's on a per room basis that you get those numbers. Generically, I've ran like a 2 decibel increase on the low end and like a -2 on the high end. So, and then the rest of the bands in the middle stay the same, but it's just after, I think it was like 12,000 hertz or something like that, it'd start to drop down ever so slightly. So you'd pull those really high screechy tones out to make things a lot more mellow, and then you get the thump of explosion as well.
Yeah, and it's helped a lot in my own system, so I'm sure it's helped a lot in yours too. Although you have carpet versus my house, I have wood floors, so that kind of adds to the difficulty of getting the room to sound great and correct as far as per the music's supposed to sound.
Well, I mean, imagine it being absorbed and kind of helping take away that super high pierce and some of the punch. To yours is just going to be reflective. Basically, you're going to get all of those tones and all those signals. That's why I think some of the people were commenting about putting like carpet right in front of your speakers, so it helps to kind of take some of that initial brunt of the waves bouncing off of it and not so much going right straight into your ears after.
Right, exactly. So as far as your Magnepan speakers go, you have 4 LRSs.
Yeah, there's a fun story behind that one. I won't get into that, but I ended up with 4 LRS speakers. I've had a bit of fun toying with those and trying and experimenting with different things. One of the things I first did was hooking them all up together. I was like, well, I got all these speakers and I really like loud noise and sound, not noise. But I like loud music. Why not add more? Wouldn't that make it louder? Well, I had to find out. So not only, I mean, I didn't go immediately like stick them behind me like a 5.1 system, or I guess even a 4.1 system in this particular regard.
Right.
I didn't go immediately stuff them behind it. No, I put them up front with the other guys. So I ended up wiring these up into a series. So basically taking them and then using the same amount of load. These are 4 ohms, so taking the same amount of load and then just dividing the wattage across, 2 speakers per channel, 2 speakers per amp. As opposed to what you could do in parallel is basically powering them both at the same time almost, and then you ended up like halving the load. So it would have been like a 2 ohm load on those, and those things they wouldn't have liked that so much. So I didn't end up doing that. But that would have also increased the the wattage you use, because when you drop ohms, you increase wattage. So, and I didn't want to. I was already overworking them as it was. So basically just wire them up in series, and then I was dividing that 600 watts now between 2 speakers, so it's 300 per each. And so I could get the volume knob a little higher, and it filled the room with bigger sound, but the soundstage really just kind of disappeared, because it was really hard to figure out exactly where to position them in the front of the room to make sure that they were just the right same amount of distance away from like where your ears were, and it kind of all just mixed together per side. So the soundstage, it was very hard to find, and the only time I really got it sounding really good, it sounded like there was a singer up on the stage, but she was bigger than life. Like, so she, you can imagine somebody up on stage, you got this figured woman, but basically she seemed like a giant that was like standing up on stage singing at me. It was like one of the weirdest things I ever heard, but it was really cool and interesting at the same time. It filled the room with sound. It was beautiful. I had it all balanced through the equalization and everything, but I ended up I was like, okay, I've had enough of that. I want kind of more of an accurate. So you got less accurate when you added them in there. And then, obviously taking them back down, you got a lot more accurate where you could define where exactly that person was standing instead of being like a giant at you. The other thing I've done with them is to use, there's a Fusion, is it F360? Mm-hmm. F360 was
Black Ice Audio.
The Black Ice Audio. I ended up borrowing that from her.
Yeah.
And then basically that is supposed to do that quadraphonic, semi-quasi stereo where it's all 4 going at the same time.
Yeah, it would be. It's kind of quadraphonic, not really like
Not
what you would see as a
exactly,
quadraphonic decoder, but this particular preamp has a 360 sound stage where, say you have, what was it, like you had 4 speakers in the back and 4 in the front. You were powering 4 different channels.
Yeah, it's powering. It's like 2 up front, 2 in the back. So you're powering 4 channels at once. So 4 monoblocks,
And
basically.
then you sit in the middle.
Yeah, and you're supposed to sit dead in the middle. Now the front plays exactly like what you would imagine the front would be. That doesn't change at all. It doesn't modify that. It only adds some to the back. And it's not like it's playing all things. It seems to like pick out certain frequencies of certain things, because I was sitting there. It's got a really cool dial. We'll end up showing you on the video. But it's got a really cool dial of like where things are supposed to be, like front and center, left and right, and then back. And it would light up depending on where things were. And it wasn't all the time. It seemed like they were on, or you could even audibly hear them. But when things were playing, you could also adjust like the back balance versus the front. Now I thought this was like the super most interesting thing about this was I could take it, I could add more to the back, but as I added more to the back, that singer that was dead front and center would start to rotate up above my head. Like she moved up here, and then I could literally, it felt like somebody was like sitting and singing above me, almost similar to like what you would imagine like having headphones on, where you're kind of surrounded in that world of like, you can't see like the center stage to it, but you're surrounded by sound and it's kind of above you almost. So depending on where that was, I could find out how high she was up on the stage or orchestra, whatever it was that I was listening to. And then I had some other balancing things on it. And I also had a sub output, which is perfect for me. But that's pretty much all the things I've done. I intend to someday potentially use them as a center channel or left and right and a full 5.1 potentially. But that's kind of what I've done to tinker with them.
Nice. Well, so as far as like the S360, what do you think the purpose of somebody wanting to do that? Sit right in the middle with 4 speakers surrounding them.
It has to. I think that it has to be like a per song basis or a per basis of like purpose for that, because it was interesting. It's nothing really that I've ever experienced before. Theater was similar with being filled with sound, but I think that maybe like on a per instance basis, some songs sounded really good. Other things like watching an orchestra, it kind of just it made things sound a little further and different distance. Like maybe you had like some trumpet behind you that was going off instead of in front of you. So it kind of like made you feel like you were sitting in the middle of the stage and like you're just surrounded by the orchestra surrounding you.
That's really weird. And I listened to this, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And just a disclaimer, it's not like surround sound as if you're watching a surround sound movie. No. It doesn't sound like that at all. It's something completely different ball game altogether.
So yeah, it was interesting. I wouldn't say that I would have it hooked up all the time and listen to it, all the time in that mode. No, I don't know that I cared for it that much. It was cool.
I just wondered what's the use case for it, because I wouldn't sit and listen to it like that. It was really cool and interesting, but for just listening to music,
yeah,
it's kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting and a fun project, but other than that, I think I'm good.
Okay, well, so you're fairly young, Jeremy. How old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay, and you don't see many young people in this hobby, other than you've seen me, but you haven't really seen many other young people into this hobby, have you?
No, not at all. In fact, it's been hard to find people that have been willing to spend money on good audio and get into that kind of thing. Where back in the day, my dad, he was into audio and really had those mono black kind of setups and stuff like that. Where today I feel like it's kind of gone away. There's not too many people out there spending money. They'll just go buy a $50 pair of Bluetooth headphones and call it a day. Like that's the best thing since sliced bread for them. So
what's your opinion of that? What do you think that is?
Well, A, one's going to be the cost, and B, I really don't know that they have an experience of what really audio and what good audio can sound like, because man, I used to listen to some things now that I can't stand to listen to on as far as like audio goes. I refuse, so after having that taste again of, that theater, and really hearing audio again, even in my, adult years, I wouldn't go back. So I think it's going to be a cost thing, and it's going to be an experience thing. They just haven't experienced it unless they're sitting in live at a concert, which they should expect to hear amazing concert sound. They didn't realize, and they really didn't know how good it could sound at home.
You think that the influx of bad music in this generation is contributing to it?
Oh, don't get me started on that. But yes, so not many people these days, I don't actually think listen to music. And it's in general the boomy noises that you hear from the car stereos that are making every part on their car rattle, to really, they wouldn't know exactly what a violin sounded like if you played it for him. So, and that boomy noise that they're hearing, that's never like an instrument that can be recreated. That's always been just something that's been playing in somebody's manufactured in some sort of audio software. So to sit them down and kind of get them introduced into something that there's absolutely has to be something out there that they'd be interested in, whether it'd be blues, which I really had liked and still do, or some country where you're bringing the instruments back into music. You're bringing music back into music and getting them to hear that. You'd start with maybe a live setting, and then go sit them in front of a pair of Magnepan speakers or something that's amazing, something that can reproduce those high tones and all the tones that it would be, and try to get them to see that you can have quality and it sound like you're just there while you're at home. And that'd be great for COVID right now, right? Am I right? Because there's no concerts and stuff going on at all anyways. So
yeah, everything's better opportunity. Just kind of still in a shutdown mode almost. I mean, I've seen it work. I've heard of videos where adults are introducing young people, like high schoolers, into music from their generation. And I heard about this one girl who was listening to the Bee Gees and just started crying because she thought it was so beautiful, and she'd never heard anything like that. And it's just really sad that this generation, a lot of them haven't heard good music. Now, there is a lot of good music that there's still making that's new in this generation that is beautiful and absolutely spectacular, but there's still a lot of bad music out there that I think is contributing to kind of the fall of where audio is going with young people.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's pretty common that, kids go to high school and pretty much everybody in high school listens to about the same kind of music. It's just that genre. If you go, and I remember specifically from my high school dance, high school prom, all of the same types of music were played. It was some country here and there, but most of it was like hip hop, R&B,
Club
music. So, and that's where I think that, again, there's opportunities because there's no instruments in those songs typically. So, again, it'd be, getting them visibility to something that they like, that's actual, music and music cool, and then introducing them to something that they can actually use at home to recreate it instead of Bluetooth headphones that connect to, their Bluetooth and their Wi-Fi's and all the wireless. Well, those things are nice and have their place in their uses. That's not audio. It's not legit audio.
So if you had the opportunity to make a big change or to do something to get young people, what would you do to draw them in?
Well, I think that the best place to start with would be colleges. Just to get some bands coming out, and you could set up a room, or it'd be a listening room, where say you get a company that donates an audio system to a college, and they set up a room, and then they can have the regulations and making sure everything's monitored and stuff and whatnot. But getting people to go in there and to listen to their own music on these systems that can produce accurate sound. Maybe modify the playlist, to only have a certain range and stuff like that, or limit to their custom songs that they'd like to play. Of like, okay, yeah, you can play one song, but like the next one, we got it. And then so basically you kind of, I don't know, you could judge basically off of what they chose, and then drop down a different menu, and then play this one next for them. And if they're going to go listen to this system, they have to listen to the other ones as well. And then I don't know, just again, visibility to kind of break down, and that's really like super intricate. But the whole point is to get stuff into colleges. I feel like getting those kids that are making debt for themselves, that potentially could be making some money later on, but getting into to see that audio can be real. And can be live and alive in front of you. Getting visibility that stuff exists out there, and then slowly kind of work your way out. How many colleges are here in America? That would be, I think, the one way that you could get younger people listening to something that's good.
I agree with that, and I think with the resurgence of vinyl too, that amongst young people. That could be a way to get them, if you had a dorm room set up like you said, and then you had a nice turntable, nice entry-level turntable, that they could start bringing their own records. It would gauge interest and bring them into bringing their own music.
Maybe if it took off really well, you could maybe charge a little bit to rent the room, so that a couple friends could come together and they could rent the room for hours at a time to go listen to their vinyl, to go do this, and that would be an activity for the kids to do. Now, like I said, there would be a lot of mentoring and like monitoring of things that would go on, obviously, inside the room, as far as making sure stuff doesn't get damaged and a whole bunch of other stuff. But as far as the idea goes, the idea is obviously there. The logistics of it would be fun, I guess.
I could see it working in like college bars and stuff too. We have a local brewery where you can go up there and bring your own record, and they'll allow you to play it on their system, and their system's not bad either. Yeah. So it's a good idea.
And absolutely would work. And I like the idea of the brewery, or even just local places. I was thinking kind of like something like coffee shops, but obviously you want to be rather quiet at a coffee shop. But it wouldn't be bad to have some decent systems playing a little old volume to play that coffee shop kind of esque music, where they're playing like that really nice, like slow jazz while people have coffee in the morning. But they hear that noise and they're like, "Where's the band at?" Oh no, it's just those really cool flat speakers that are sitting over there. So I don't know. That would be a good idea too.
Yeah, I agree. So, Jeremy, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
I think that pretty much covers today. And for future videos and stuff, I'm gonna break down some equalization for you guys and show you exactly what I went through to kind of get those and what the crossover does in the whole piece of what I have going on. But no, I don't necessarily have anything further for today.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy,
Cynthia,
thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for the next video where he breaks down equalization and another video where he talks more about his subwoofer. Thank you.